Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's Toolbox Talk. My name is Sean Frey, guys, and I will be here in the background throughout this webinar. If you guys have got any questions whatsoever, just go ahead and pop them in the questions tab. They will come through to me, and I will get them ready for Chris at the end of the webinar. If it is a question on the service or on the Articulate website, I will go ahead and answer that. But if it is a question on the source material, obviously I will leave it to the professionals. But other than that, guys, I am going to hand it over because this is only a half an hour session. So I hope everyone enjoys the session and good luck. Chris, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Sean, and a very big welcome to all our attendees once again this morning. We're looking forward to another Toolbox Talk brought to you by FEM as well as the Institute of Plumbing South Africa. We'd also like to again say a very big thank you to SIOSH, the South African Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, for allowing us to accredit it for 1 CPD point. So every week, if you are a SIOSH member, you can get your CPD point allocated to you. You should know how to go onto the website for SIOSH, log into your membership area, and then register for the FEM Toolbox Talk every Tuesday morning. For those of you who are PIRB members, obviously you would also want to send yours through to IOPSA or PIRB so that you can also be allocated your CPD point for these Toolbox Talks. I think that is the case, so Sean can just double check on that. And then if there are any other questions, please do not forget to drop us a question in the question tab or the chat tab, or drop us an email, chris@ohss.co.za. So just to start off this morning, I'd like to say a very big thank you to everybody from last week. Just very briefly for all the messages from my grandfather as well. I really do appreciate that. And thank you very much for your patience for me, getting back to you a little bit later on those emails. I am back in full force from this week. So any questions that do come through, I will be here for today as well as on the email as well. But let us get straight into the Toolbox Talk for this morning. As we mentioned last week, we are going to be looking at inclement weather. Now we know summer is on its way, spring has just hit us, and we are looking forward to some sizzling hot days as well as some very heavy rainfall to come. But as we enter this season, obviously leading up to the festive season with everybody looking forward to their holidays, obviously we are really wanting to have a good braai, relax on the beach, have a good swim. But one of the things that we need to remember during this coming season is the potential dangers of extreme weather conditions. Now, we've just gone through a pretty hectic winter. For many of us in and around South Africa, it was a little bit worse than last year. For some of us, not as bad as last year. However, with the rainy season coming in, especially those who are working outside on construction sites and those at high-risk areas such as working at heights are really in danger because of extreme weather conditions. And that is why we are going to go into a little bit of detail of what is inclement weather, the different types of inclement weather that we are going to face, and a few tips or safety tips that we can look out for during the course of the season coming up. And again, if you have any comments or suggestions, please send them through. We really do appreciate it. We have received quite a few that we are working on incorporating into some of our Toolbox Talks, and we must say thank you to you for sending these through. Christian from last week, some excellent suggestions coming through for construction sites, and we'd like to encourage you to please continue to do that. All you plumbers out there, since IOPSA is one of the sponsors of these Toolbox Talks, really this is for you. If you have any suggestions, please send them through as well. We really, really do appreciate them. The definition of extreme weather or inclement weather that we are currently looking at here in South Africa is wind speeds greater than 40 kilometers an hour, electric storms, or rainfall in excess of 40 millimeters an hour. Now, during these situations, these are extreme. It's inclement. So in other words, it's very dangerous to get to this stage. So we want to go for the safest option. In other words, we do not want to wait until the speed of the wind reaches 40 kilometers an hour before we stop working. We do not want to wait for electric storms to be so close that they are going to have an immediate effect on us, as well as heavy rainfalls. So we need to keep a watch on specific alerts that come out when it comes to inclement weather, hazardous conditions in the rain, wind, or even really hot days that could affect us in the next coming months. But please remember that the definition that we are receiving at the moment is the maximum amount. So really, this is not best practice. We do not want to say, well, we have to still continue to work up to this point. We need to be reasonable as well as practical as employees as well as employers to setting health and safety standards that will still keep us in a safe working condition during these times. And we'll give you a few suggestions on what we have found in the construction industry, but you yourself can also share your suggestions with us as to what you would think is reasonably practical when it comes to extreme weather conditions, and what would you say is best practice in the industry. Now, if you are in the construction industry, many are protected by safety specifications. And this is coming from the client. The client representative generally has a nice safety specification drawn up. You'll also get a very nice baseline risk assessment of all the hazards. And this generally includes your weather conditions and your environmental factors. The principal contractor will then also have a safety specification drawn up, very much in line with the client, sometimes a little bit different. But either way, they would normally come together to provide contractors or subcontractors on site with a safety specification to assist them. And this specification really helps us to guide or plan the way we are going to react to hazards, including environmental hazards. Now, along with legislation such as your Occupational Health and Safety Act, your construction regulation, and all these safety specifications, we are very well equipped to be able to take proactive measures toward hazards. It just means we need to take a little bit extra time in deciding what we are going to do beforehand. Now, we do not want to get to a dangerous situation before we decide what we are going to do. So as it says, take cognizance of the weather during projects is vital to ensuring our plans are effectively executed. Now, you can only execute something that you already have, which means take the time now, before there is high wind, before heavy rainfall, or before thunderstorms hit us, to make an action plan of what you are going to do, what your company is going to do during these dangerous situations. And take some of the hazards that we are going to discuss today in mind. Keep these almost in the back of your mind while working, and always take into account the weather conditions for that day or for that week. Now, many of us do that specifically in construction, especially those working on cranes, working at heights, roof sheeters, guys who are installing structures, because weather plays such a big part in completing their project. But what if we are not on a construction site? Perhaps we are doing maintenance or personal homes. Well, even then, weather conditions can still affect us. So let us take a look at some of these conditions. For one, we'd like to look at thunderstorms. Now, thunderstorms are pretty dangerous for two reasons. They generally bring a lot of rain with them, but also, being thunder, it has the potential to conduct lightning, which can shock or electrocute a person. So here's a few suggestions. If you are in a situation where your hair starts almost standing up on its own, leave the area as fast as possible, as lightning will almost certainly strike that spot. If you see lightning flashes, so you're on a site, you're driving somewhere, just count the seconds until you hear the thunder. Now, all of us did this as kids. We generally counted to a very few seconds before we heard that thunderclap. The suggestion is, At 30 seconds, you need to suspend all outdoor activities and seek safe shelter. Now, this might not seem reasonable or practical, but if you count 15 seconds or less, a lightning strike could occur where you are. Now, many of us said, well, 1 second is for every kilometer, and that is true. The problem is a lightning storm is coming at you at such a great speed that it could reach you before you have locked out, tagged out, or shut down and suspended your duties. So when we say we down tools at this time, it doesn't just take 1 or 2 minutes. Many of us in the construction industry have to shut down entire plant. We have to move a lot of staff off of site. And this could take quite a few minutes, half an hour to an hour sometimes, to actually shut down that entire site. Thus, at 30 seconds, we would want to suspend that just so that we are safe, not waiting for that lightning storm to reach us before we take action. Remember, we want to be in the safest possible working environment. Now, unsafe areas during lightning or electric storms are obviously these very high potential danger areas, such as working at heights, working under a lot of trees, being the highest point if you're on a hilltop, in an isolated shed or building, or on open water. Now, if you are in any of these situations during a lightning storm or an electric storm, you are at the greatest danger of having an electrocution, specifically if you are working alone in these areas. And that is because when we work alone, we normally say to ourselves, well, we're okay, we're the only ones at danger, there's nobody else that we have to look after, and we can take our lives into our own hands. But remember at this stage that there are also family members, friends that care about you. So don't take those chances. Rather, if you see it, just suspend your work for a time, let the thunder pass, and then continue to work afterwards. Again, many of you might say, well, that's not practical for us. We need to get the job done. And that is true. We do appreciate that. But what is the safest way of doing this? When we are looking at excavations as well, and according to your construction regulations, oftentimes we have to get onto site and start working almost immediately. But please remember, the construction regulation does state that after inclement weather, all excavations must be inspected. So it is a daily register, and this is because during inclement weather such as heavy rain, lightning, a lot of sun, it could affect the actual stability of that excavation. And thus it needs to be inspected for that stability so that it doesn't cave in, as you see in the picture. But if you've inspected this morning and it rains in the afternoon and you need to continue to work after lunch, please remember you will have to inspect it again. That is what the law is stating. You need to inspect it every single morning before you start that task. But if there's a freak lightning storm or a quick rain, it will have to be inspected after that inclement weather again by the competent person, and then make sure it is declared safe. And obviously this must be noted in a register. So there should be proof of this type of excavation safety. And this goes the same with scaffolding. In line with SANS 10085, section 12.5, a competent appointed scaffold inspector must carry out inspections of their scaffolding. Generally, it is within every 7 days that a scaffold must be inspected. But notice that it says after inclement weather. Again, inclement weather has a severe impact on the stability of scaffolding. And we do not know what it's done to the ground, what it could have done beneath the ground. It could have opened up cavities. A lot of water could have softened that ground around it. And now the support structure is not as stable as it was when we first erected that scaffolding. Thus, the law is very strict. It has to be inspected every 7 days, but directly after inclement weather, has affected that scaffolding. So very similar to your excavations on a daily basis, and then directly after inclement weather as well. For those of you working at heights, remember, heights means anything on an elevated working platform. For some companies, they give you a specific height. In other companies, there is no specific height. And that is because when you look at the law, they don't specify 1.2 meters, 2 meters, or 1.8 meters. There is no law regarding the actual height of what height is. So that is why we say an elevated working platform. As soon as your foot leaves the ground, you are now performing work on an elevated platform. Thus, if you're on scaffolds, roofs, mobile elevated work platforms, we must be aware of the dangers of rain, wind, and lightning storms. Again, inclement weather has a very big impact on those of you working at heights. And as you can see in the picture below, falling to a lower level is never a good thing. So no work is to be done during times of inclement weather at all. And remember, every single person on that site, all staff members, must know the procedures to follow when these hazards arise. Obviously, we do not want to down tools where we are and leave. The minute we feel the rain coming, we need to pack up and remove ourselves from that height as soon as possible. Now, on some construction sites, no work is permitted during rain at all, even a little bit of rain. And then obviously when wind speeds are in excess of 30 kilometers an hour. Now remember the definition in the beginning, we did say it was 40 kilometers an hour, severe wind or inclement weather. But the safe course is to not work during 30 kilometers an hour. Again, this is only a guide, and it must also depend on a good, effective risk assessment, as well as the working conditions of where we are. So really it is up to you of how do you view safety when it comes to inclement weather? Will we take the chance? Do we stretch it to the maximum and wait until it's 40 kilometers an hour? Or do we give ourselves a safe buffer, saying that 30 kilometers an hour is safe, but as soon as we reach that, we would like to stop working? Again, make sure that you look at your safety specification as well as your risk assessment to have an effective plan for stoppage of work. Now, with heat, rain, lightning storms, as well as high wind, all of them have a danger to us. And particularly coming up with these very hot days, and we've just had a pretty hot weekend, especially here in Johannesburg, high levels of humidity and temperature during summer months can be experienced. And workers who have a risk of heat exhaustion with discomfort levels or the discomfort index rises above 100 are at greater risk of heat exhaustion as well as heat stroke. So what our suggestion is if that discomfort index rises above 105, work may be temporarily stopped just to the risk of heat stroke and collapse. But that means you need to have a weather station or a person in charge of checking this weather and to make sure that that discomfort level hasn't risen above 105. So really, we want to be able to manage heat stroke or heat exhaustion. Now, how can we do that? Well, for one thing, we want to take a look at the symptoms as well as the treatments of how to go about ensuring we do not have heat stroke or heat exhaustion. The symptoms of heat exhaustion, such as faint or dizziness, excessive sweating, cold, pale, or clammy skin. So he's extremely hot, but he feels cold. He's starting to shake. He has nausea or starts vomiting, rapid and a weak pulse, or muscle cramps. On the heat stroke side, you will have a throbbing headache, probably no sweat at all. His body temperature will rise above 103 degrees. And then obviously, again, this will cause nausea, vomiting. He will have a very strong pulse as well as very fast, and he may lose consciousness. Either way, the way we want to treat it is to get emergency help. Move them to a cool location, keep them cool until they are treated. Now, here we can see a little bit of a first aid treatment for heat strokes, specifically coming up to the summer months. Call your supervisor, your senior supervisor, to assess the situation. Remove excess clothing, jackets and jerseys of that person. Try and cool them down as soon as possible. If the person is awake, you can give them small amounts of water to drink, but keep them cool at all times. Obviously, if the person does stop breathing, you will need to apply artificial respiration only if you are trained as a first aider to be able to provide this. And then if necessary, in fact, all the time, rather take this person to the hospital for a checkup. The reason for this is we do not know what additional damage has occurred to that person. So first aid is an extremely important part of all types of work. If you haven't gone for that training, look for a company that can give you the first aid training that is required. Even though you don't need it by law, according to some companies, would it not be a good idea to be prepared in a situation of extreme temperatures hurting one of our employees during this coming months? Well, how do we get to this discomfort index, and how can we be proactive when it comes to heat? According to the South African Weather Services, they have an index that evaluates the impact of heat stress on an individual. And this takes into account the temperature as well as the humidity. And there on the right-hand side, you have a little bit of a formula of how to take the discomfort index, which is 2 times the dry bulb or air temperature in degrees Celsius. And then obviously we are taking now the actual humidity. We divide that by 100 times your dry bulb plus 24, and this will give you your following index. Between 90 and 100 is very uncomfortable. Between 100 and 110 is extremely uncomfortable. And then over 110 is hazardous to our health. And there's a little diagram on the left-hand side of how this is actually done on a full box. So since the relative humidity in the hair can be calculated, then obviously this formula can be adapted to be able to help us understand what is the discomfort index on our site, where are we sitting in terms of hazard or danger to an employee, specifically when it comes to heat stroke or heat exhaustion, and how can you proactively manage this type of danger. So if you didn't know about this, again, I will always share my slides with you, but you can go onto the South African Weather Service and look this up. This entire discomfort index is on there, but I am willing to share this information with you as well. Just drop me an email and I will send you the entire slide. Now, as we mentioned earlier, we want to be proactive about hazards and dangers on site, which means we also need to plan or prepare for if something goes wrong, which we really don't want to happen. But we still need to have an emergency plan. Whether you are the client, the principal contractor, or even just a contractor, you must have an emergency response manual. And this will include procedures for adverse weather conditions, high wind, flood, storms, lightning, etc. Now, in the event of any of these things happening or any other conditions that are affected due to this inclement weather, we need to make sure that we have precautionary measures in place. But we also must be able to make a decision on when these must be taken. So really, again, good planning, an emergency preparation plan must be put in place, and all employees do need to know what to do during this inclement weather. Because as soon as it affects them, you need to act fast before the onset of symptoms and dangerous things like heat stroke actually occur and potentially cost the lives of our employees. Now, when it comes to those foggy mornings, sometimes in summer we do get them, especially if you are driving from Johannesburg through to your Eastern Territories. We often do get it, thick or dense fog. The dangers here is obviously reducing the visibility of driving. So for many of us on the roads already, just during the day, in broad daylight, it's dangerous to drive on our South African roads. Now imagine putting thick and dense fog into that with the same drivers not taking into account the hazards of thick or dense fog. This can result obviously in disruptions to traffic as well as many accidents. Now, studies have shown that people are attracted to flashing lights, so we ask you to please avoid using your emergency flashes unless it is completely necessary. What you want to do is to make sure that your lights are on, not on brights, because sometimes if you put them on brights, you can actually reduce your visual even more. But we ask you to drive for life. So decrease your speed. Leave yourself a lot of room between yourself and the person in front of you. When you do brake gently. Try to avoid skidding. Obviously, if your wheels start locking up, you need to ease off the brake so that the vehicle can continue to gain traction. Turn your lights on to increase your visibility to other motorists. Again, just be careful of those high beams. Keep your lights and windshields clean at all time. Use lower gears to keep traction. Lower gears obviously also decreasing your speed. We do not want to increase our speed with our lower gears, so really try and drive a little bit slow on the road, specifically during these times. And then be especially careful on dangerous areas such as bridges, overpasses, or frequently traveled roads. These normally are the ones that will freeze first. Even at temperatures above freezing, if the weather conditions are wet, you might encounter ice in shady areas or exposed roadways like bridges. And then something that some of us do tend to do, we assume our vehicle can handle all road conditions. So even if we do have a four-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, we can still encounter problems on icy roads. So please drive carefully, not just for ourselves, but also for those around us, other road users. So really, what could you do as somebody who wants to take seriously the hazards and dangers of extreme weather conditions, especially now coming up to our rainy season and then also the blistering heat of summer that is soon to see us? Stay indoors and off the roads if possible during these extreme weather conditions. Listen for special warnings on radio or TV. Avoid crossing rivers or swollen streams where water reaches above your ankles. Always move to higher ground during these types of floods. In buildings, move valuables to a safe place above the expected floor level. Switch off electricity at supply points to that building. And then in rural areas, try to protect or relocate animals to a safer place on higher ground. We really do not want high rain to affect any of us, especially those of us who want to take health and safety seriously. It just means that we need to plan for it now. Now, here in South Africa, we had the National Development Plan of 2030, and this is what it said about climate change in South Africa. Emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are changing the Earth's climate, potentially imposing significant global cost that will fall disproportionately on the poor. Rising temperatures, more erratic rainfall, and extreme weather events are likely to take a heavy toll on Africa, with an increased spread of tropical diseases and growing losses from droughts and flooding. Climate change has the potential to reduce food production and the availability of potable water, with consequences for migration patterns and levels of conflict. Now, this might seem like a pretty serious saying or statement, and it really is. Water is life. Without water, we cannot survive. Without food, we cannot survive. And adverse weather conditions or climate change is happening all around us. We need to take action now to protect ourselves not only during our work, but the actual lifestyle that we want to enjoy of having food and the availability to drinkable water. So for those of you plumbers out there who are doing rainwater harvesting, this is just a little bit of a did you know section for this Toolbox Talk speaking about climate change. Remember the national norms and standards relating to environmental health in terms of National Health Act of 2003 in section 12 stated that rainwater is relatively free from impurities, except those impurities picked up by the rain from the atmosphere. So the quality of rainwater may also deteriorate during harvesting, storage, and also household use. So please remember the following three things must be adhered to if you are installing rainwater harvesting. It must be well designed, with cleaner catchments to prevent contaminations. Cisterns and storage tanks must be properly covered to prevent pollution, mosquito access, and breeding inside the tanks. And then obviously all of these EHPs must educate the community on good hygiene practices in relation to the use of rainwater at household level to prevent contamination and the spread of disease. So educate your clients. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate it. That was a little bit about inclement weather, and I hope you did enjoy the information. There is a lot more we can speak about, but as it is only a half an hour section and it is 7:30, we are going to end off by saying thank you very much to all our attendees, and we look forward to seeing you next week for the topic of that toolbox talk being slip and trip. We'll hand it over back to you, Sean.
Perfect, Chris. We have got a question this morning just before we do end off. The question for you reads, what time frame should one use when changing a geyser with asbestos roof on an extremely hot day?
This is a very good one. What you would want to do is check the temperature inside that roof. Obviously, getting that dry bulb temperature will help you with the actual index. Once it reaches over 105, as we mentioned, that is when you would want to stop. So you would be able to calculate this. If you'd like, you can drop me your email and I can send you that algorithm again to be able to work out what that index is. But generally on a very hot day, over 34, 35 degrees Celsius, I would say within a few hours that discomfort index will be able to reach its maximum.
All right, and then just before we do end off, another question has just come up. I think it reads, for lightning, people can look into the Clip-on strike alert lightning devices when working outside. They are portable and work well. That was just a comment from the audience.
Yeah, I have actually heard about this. These clip-on strike alerts are very, very good. Basically what it does is it alerts you that lightning is imminently close. It is a clip-on. They're not very expensive. It can be used for guys working at heights, working on construction sites, or even if you just take safety seriously, you can be working outside, have this clip-on, and it will alert you that lightning is imminent in your area.
All right, and then that is all of the questions we have for this morning. Just before I do end off, Chris, we do have a couple comments from the audience saying thank you very much, because they really can tell how much effort you put into these toolbox talks. But I am going to go ahead and end off the session, guys. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Hope to see everyone again same time next week, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks so much. Goodbye.
Cheers, Sean.